Welcome in to One of One Sports, the only one for your original sports takes and analysis. And for the most part, week one of college football is in the books. And I spent weeks, maybe even months, analyzing, getting preseason predictions ready, and just throw them away. Just so much wrong already in week one. We've got a ton to talk about, so let's get into it. I think the obvious place to start, I think anyone talking about this sort of thing is going to start with what was the biggest game of the week, arguably the biggest game of the year in terms of what we had in terms of preseason number one versus preseason number three or two, depending on what poll you were going with. You had Arch Manning, who we'll get to. You had Jeremiah Smith. It's Ohio State. It's Texas, defending champ, rematch last year's semifinals. Everything you could want in a week one matchup was in this game. It was absolutely a ginormous stage, and it was not exactly what I was expecting. I expected a heavy defensive performance. I talked about in my breakdown that I thought Texas was going to have the best defense in the country this year, or maybe not for sure, but I thought they were like my pick. If I had to guess, I would thought Texas would have the best defense in the country, and I expected a lower scoring game where because Texas had the better defense, they'd win the game. And if you would have told me before that Texas was going to hold Ohio State to 14 points, I'd be like, well, looks like I got it. But no, and that was because this Texas offense looked terrible. I mean, you got to start with Arch Manning. He is quarterback of the team, and I'm sure if you've been online at all, you've seen plenty of people making fun of him, ripping him. And when the expectations are as high as they were, when you were the Heisman favorite with only two starts under your belt, when you have the last name Manning, when you have guys like Paul Feinbaum going on the morning, say you're the best college player since Tim Tebow, you had so much to live up to, just an insane, potentially unbearable amount of pressure placed on you to lead this Texas team, who's also the national championship favorite. And it just was not there. He was inaccurate on so many throws. Throws were behind people, throws were late. He was holding it too long sometimes. It was just nothing looked right for Arch Manning. He was hitting the dirt a lot, looked like his arm strength wasn't what it was supposed to be. There was just not a lot to take away that was positive. I will say in the last 3 minutes of the game, he did start to look better. His three best throws all came in the final two drives where Texas was able to score a touchdown, get inside Ohio State territory once, and then had a chance to tie the game at the end where they came up short on fourth down. That's where I got to talk about this Ohio State defense, because they left off kind of right where they did last year, where they were arguably the best defense in the country. Once again, get a goal line stand, stopping Texas on fourth and goal from the one, just like they did so many times last year. And even with all this newness, like the entire defensive front being new, they still looked really, really good. I'm a bit skeptical that it was more just Texas looking, anemic offensively. But if there's a chance this Ohio State defense is carrying over despite losing, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau among their other defensive linemen, while losing their defensive coordinator Jim Knowles to Penn State as well, and they're still going to be this good defensively, that is a scary proposition. And then the final thing is a misleading box score. Like if you look at it, Texas, they passed for more yards, they ran for more yards. They had a better third down conversion percentage. Like if you just go through the box score, Texas won. They won looking at the team stats and overall. You would think, oh, Texas won this game. But when you have, the four, I want to say, turnovers on downs, two in Ohio State territory, one on the goal line, and you have the interception, while Ohio State doesn't turn it over at all, converts on their fourth down from the goal line. That is the difference in the game. And it's not like Julian Sain was great. And Ryan Day said he had told him the goal is just win, and he did that. And he could have had better stats if not for some big time drops from Jeremiah Smith as well as Max Clare. But yeah, he played fine. And this Ohio State team that now you got by your biggest hurdle early in the season, you're going to get better. Obviously, you can't write off Texas as it's still a team with a lot of talent, and you were versing another extremely talented team. You'll get better as well. But for me, a Texas team I picked to go to the national championship game, a team I picked to win this game, to win the SEC, is a disappointing way to start the season, and you've got to be at least somewhat concerned for the offense. Next up, we got to talk about the upset of the week, and that was Florida State shocking Alabama. I think Alabama was about a 2-touchdown favorite in this game, and for all the talking that Thomas Castellanos did in the offseason about Alabama not going to be able to stop him, and I thought he was insane. I was like, they're going to get crushed. And he backed it all up. He looked great. And it was just truly, truly shocking to me to see an Alabama team come out this poorly in week one. And, last time we saw Florida State, they were a 2-10 football team whose only wins were, I think, Cal and Charleston Southern, lost all other games, while Alabama was, I think, a 9-3 team that almost made the playoff. And when I was looking on paper, sure, Alabama had injuries. Tim Keenan, maybe your best defensive lineman up there with LT Overton. He wasn't there. Your starting running back, Jam Miller, was out. But I still thought Alabama has more talent. They should be better on the lines of scrimmage, and Florida State shouldn't be able to guard the receivers. Florida State's bringing in all these new linemen, and Alabama should be able to control the game. But no, FSU's running attack was dominant. Thomas Castellanos at times looked untackleable, and the new O-line, which was pretty much all new because of how bad last year's was, looked great already in week one. This leads to a ton of question marks about Alabama and FSU, because you could take it as someone like me who predicted Alabama to be a playoff team in the preseason, just a couple weeks ago, who predicted them to be, I think, 10-2, a contender in the SEC, right? A really good team, preseason top 10, just like the 8 people had them. We think that FSU was just severely underrated? Do we think Alabama was severely overrated? Or most likely, is it a mixture of both? And which way is it closer to? And for me, I think it's probably based on the way they look. I think Alabama is just not a good team at the moment. I don't think FSU is some ACC contender, at least not right now. I have to see more of that. I think they can be I predict them to be 7-5. I think in the preseason, I still expect like a 7-5, 8-4 season maybe now from them, like a good team. But now Alabama, instead of expecting playoff, I'm expecting more like an 8-4 season from them if they don't improve. Which, of course, I mean, if they don't improve a lot, obviously every team from week one you would expect has a good chance to improve. But the question marks for Alabama, you're going to get healthier, so you'll get better naturally. But Ty Simpson, there were flashes of things that he did really well, but he didn't look like a great quarterback. Ryan Williams, I don't know what was wrong with him. He got banged up a little early in the game. He didn't look good at all, but the run defense is just the big concern. That's got to get figured out. And now Kalen DeBoer 6-4 against unranked teams, whereas Nick Saban was 124-4. If he doesn't get this figured out, it's crazy to say, but he could be run out of Tuscaloosa very soon, because they have high expectations for his program. And to be honest, he is just not living up to them. This one was truly surprising to me. I was, even when Florida State, I think, was up in the fourth quarter, I was still saying, no, I think Alabama's coming back. I think something's going to go wrong. Alabama's going to find a way to figure out how to win this game. And they just never did. It was crazy to see. I could not believe it. Next, let's talk about some of the Thursday, Friday games quickly. Georgia Tech beating Colorado 27-20. This one's interesting because I think Georgia Tech was clearly the better team for 3 reasons. You started your first 3 drives all with turnovers. Statistical anomaly there. You lose the turnover battle by 3. You're supposed to lose that game if it's even a somewhat close opponent. Georgia Tech still managed to win. And especially you start off the game with 3 straight turnovers. It looked like a team that was going to lose a football game. Like I say in week one, and I'm sure many other people say this, but games can be lost instead of won. And Georgia Tech looked like a team that was going to lose a game that they should probably be able to win, but they still managed to come through and win. The reason for that was Colorado looked not very good at run defense. Haynes King was running kind of all over them. Jamal Haynes looked good as well. So the run defense for Colorado is going to be a concern, especially in a Big 12 that has several teams that I think will be good running the ball. And then at the end of the game, Deion Sanders' clock management was just abysmal. What he was doing with those timeouts was inexplicable. You've got to call one to save time. It was just terrible clock management. Georgia Tech, though, clearly the better team. If they clean up the turnovers, which, you're not going to turn over the ball 3 times per game, they're going to be a really good team in the ACC, like I predicted. At least I'm still confident in that. And then Auburn, Baylor. Jackson Arnold I know he could run the ball, but he looked great running the ball, better than I thought he would. The passing game, still a question mark. Not going to say he was bad, but, when a team forces him to beat them with his arm at Oklahoma, a lot of times he wasn't doing that. A lot of the games that Oklahoma won with him at quarterback, including the Alabama game, he was better on the ground than he was with his arm. So I'm still waiting to see him, show that he can lead a dynamic passing attack, especially when Auburn has these great receivers like Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton. Baylor, still a good team. Sawyer Robertson looked really good. The weapons looked really good, but you just weren't able to run the ball against Auburn. And in the Big 12, I think you're going to see Baylor be a lot better of a rushing team when you have a back as good as Bryson Washington and experienced O-line, and you're going up against defensive lines that don't have the high-end recruits a team like Auburn does. Then Baylor's offense, I think, will look even better. But yeah, when you take away the run game from Baylor, they're obviously going to struggle, as that's one of the main things they're looking to do. And they just didn't have, the type of line of scrimmage play to assert their will on Auburn. It was actually flipped around. Auburn was dominant running against them. And for a Baylor team, if that happens, they're never going to win. And then Nebraska survived Cincinnati. They were clearly the better team, but I couldn't help but think at the end of the game, like Nebraska is going to blow this again, somehow lose a close game. But they came away with it. And then South Florida looked really good, absolutely crushing Boise State. I thought Boise would win, but I wouldn't have been surprised if South Florida won. But to win in the fashion they did, just not even competitive, that was really, really surprising. And South Florida already asserting themselves as one of the top contenders potentially in the Group of Five playoff race. Up there with like a Navy, I think is really good. Tulane beat Northwestern already, but still they make that interesting. The last big game of the day was LSU Clemson, where the LSU Tigers defeated the Clemson Tigers 17-10. There's a lot of similarities to draw to the Ohio State Texas game. This was a game I did expect much more offense explosion from. I know some people expected that from Texas Ohio State. I expected more than 14-7, but I thought those defenses would keep it a fairly low scoring game. I was thinking like 20-17 Texas range, like something like that. This game, I thought when looking at, Cade Klubnik, Garrett Musselmeyer being two of the maybe top five quarterbacks in the country, looking at these receiver cores with Wesco and Moore and Williams versus the two Andersons and Barry and Brown, I thought we were in for an offensive explosion, like at least one team cracking 30, and that was just not the case at all. And Clemson's offense was actually super, super disappointing, and it looked to have a lot of the same issues it did last year when versing top opponents. The offense looked really explosive against bad teams, and when they played, good teams, including it was Georgia or South Carolina or Louisville, the offense was terrible. And today it was because they had no balance. They couldn't run the ball at all. I think 31 yards on 20 attempts is terrible, and that's just not going to cut it. The offensive line I thought was going to be one of the strengths of this team. It did not look great. Cade Klubnik couldn't really get anything going on the ground as well. There was a lot of pressure being provided by LSU, and we knew running back was a question mark as your top backs were a converted wide receiver in Adam Randall and Gideon Davidson, a true freshman. But 31 on 20 is pretty unacceptable for a team ranked in the top five in the preseason. I don't think it helped that your number one receiver in Tony Williams went out super early. And, when you lose that kind of a threat, even though you have other good receivers like Wesco Moore, he's your top guy, and losing him definitely hurt the offense for the rest of the game. And then that leads to the question of how good is the LSU defense? Like I said, I think it was more of a Clemson lack of balance combined with missing your top guy, and they all kind of culminated into a really bad offensive performance from Clemson. But you have to give LSU a lot of credit. I do think, they're going to have a really good pass rush. Harold Perkins looks healthy, and we know how good he can be. Patrick Payton provides rush. Whit Weeks really good at linebacking court, and the secondary did a really good job covering some really talented Clemson receivers. So this LSU defense, I do think, is legit. Not saying like top 10 in the country, but a really good defense. And when you combine that with the offensive potential they have, they could be scary good in the SEC. And when you see Alabama already going down, Texas already going down, LSU is the one that's kind of saved the SEC's reputation this week. Auburn beat Baylor. But if LSU had lost this game, it would have been a lot of headlines about the SEC's down. Those teams still lost. LSU won. So right now, they've moved, at least for the time being, ahead of those teams in terms of how they are viewed this season, which makes them a surefire threat to be in the playoff, which they already were. But for a team that I was a little bit lower on than the consensus, I've certainly, elevated them in my mind. Last thing I do want to say about Clemson is, as a team I picked to win the ACC, make the playoff, go far in the playoff, it's still a team I'm holding out hope on and believe in. But in terms of winning the national championship, they look closer to the recent Clemson teams than the Clemson teams of the past, led by the Deshaun Watsons and the Trevor Lawrences. They look closer to more recent Clemson teams, which are still really good teams, still teams that could win the ACC, but they did not look the part of a national title contender. So they are definitely, I'm already starting to lose a little bit of confidence, as I thought this was going to be kind of a big bounce back to like Clemson from 5 years ago. I'm already losing confidence that that's something that's in the books this year. All right, the show's winding down, so it's time for our 2-minute drill. Put 2 minutes on the clock. to talk about some other storylines. So for me, Utah in the nightcap, super impressive against UCLA, absolutely dominant win. And we'll talk about Nico more in a second, but Devon Dampier looked incredible. I watched him play my high school team. He played at Saguaro High School. He eliminated us multiple times where he just could not tackle him. Still looked like that. They right now look like maybe the best team in the Big 12. Speaking of Nico Iamaleava, he looked pretty bad. And now you got to talk about, did Tennessee actually upgrade at QB? Because Joey Aguilar looked really good. He was accurate on the deep ball, something Nico Iamaleava struggled with last year at Tennessee. And the Tennessee offense looked back to being really explosive in a way it didn't look last year despite making the playoff. Then you got to talk about true freshman quarterbacks delivering. Bryce Underwood for Michigan looked really good. You could see why he was the number one recruit. The talent was there, and he instilled a lot of confidence in me as someone who roots for Michigan and picked them to do really big things this season. I love what I saw. Then Malik Washington at Maryland and Bear Brockmeyer at BYU looked really good as well. Now, Maryland was playing FAU, and he started a little shaky, but then he got it going. And Bachmeyer didn't have to do much against Portland State, but while he wasn't, he looked solid. And then I don't fully know how you say his name, but Saga Politele from Cal, left-handed quarterback against Oregon State in the nightcap, little Pac-12 after dark action, looked incredible. And then finally, Kansas State survived North Dakota. And as a team that I picked to make the playoff and win the Big 12, I was nervous. Like going 0-2 already, like losing Iowa State was one thing. But if they had not got that game-winning drive to win 38-35, I was going to be like, that prediction already looks terrible. And it still doesn't look great, but it salvaged it at least for another weeks. And I do think the Ireland trip had something to do with it. They can bounce back. I'm still holding out some confidence in that Big 12 title pick. With that being said, that's all I have for today's show. I will have, an episode coming out later tonight, I think, to recap the Miami, Notre Dame, South Carolina, Virginia Tech games. And typically when I do this, we'll do like a ranking at the end. I'll give at least like my top 10 teams. But because there's so many big games left, I'm going to do that later in the week when I'll normally do predictions on Tuesday, move predictions one day back to Wednesday. And then after that, when college football is on its regular schedule, we'll have the recap show, we'll have the prediction show, and potentially have a miscellaneous show later in the week. Let me know what you guys thought. What were your biggest takeaways from week one? I thank you guys all for watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Until next time.